The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses has once again performed an extraordinary feat of doctrinal gymnastics, this time on the subject of higher education. The latest governing body update from Jehovah's Witnesses presents one of the most brazen examples of organizational hypocrisy. After decades of systematically discouraging higher education, branding it as spiritually dangerous and incompatible with faithful service, the Watchtower organization has now quietly rebranded this pursuit as a matter of personal decision. This stunning reversal exposes the arbitrary nature of what the organization has long claimed to be divine guidance, leaving countless families to grapple with the devastating consequences of following previous spiritual direction. For decades, the organization condemned university as a hotbed of moral corruption, atheism, and wasted time that should instead be spent pioneering. Young witnesses were pressured into trade jobs, part-time work, or low-wage employment to keep them free for Jehovah's service. Families who dared to send their children to university were shamed. Elders warned against it from the platform, and countless bright young lives were deliberately stunted under the weight of organizational guilt. And now, suddenly, higher education is a matter of conscience.
Now, for the rest of our update, we're going to talk about secular education. And we'll be speaking primarily to young ones and their parents, although we all can benefit from this information. Many young people are asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? Of course, the best career is a life in full-time service. Even so, full-time servants need to support themselves financially. In some places, it's possible to earn a decent living without getting further education. In other lands, additional education is required if you hope to find employment that has reasonable hours and that pays fairly well. In such cases, a brother or sister may wonder, should I get additional education? If so, what type? Now, what do we mean by additional education? This refers to any secular education or training beyond the basic education provided by the government. It includes courses offered by universities, colleges, apprenticeships, trade schools, technical schools, vocational training, short courses, and continuing education. Is it appropriate for Christians to pursue additional education? With this update, we'd like to clarify our understanding. While there are dangers involved in pursuing certain forms of education, basically, whether to obtain additional education or not is a matter for personal decision.
Parents dutifully followed this guidance, sometimes against their better judgment, steering their children away from educational opportunities that could have transformed their futures. Circuit overseers and elders reinforced these teachings, making it clear that pursuing higher education, or as they so sneakily branded, additional education, was tantamount to choosing the world over Jehovah. The social pressure was immense, and those who dared to pursue college often faced judgment, loss of privileges, or social ostracism within their congregations. What makes this doctrinal flip particularly egregious is not just the change itself, but the casual manner in which it's presented. The governing body member delivering this update speaks as if this has always been the organization's position, employing the classic Watchtower technique of historical revisionism. There's no acknowledgement of the previous hardline stance, no apology to those whose lives were derailed by following the earlier divine guidance, and certainly no recognition of the contradiction this represents. The phrase, "we'd like to clarify our understanding," is extremely galling. This isn't a clarification, it's a complete reversal of decades of dogma. When an organization claims to be God's channel of communication on earth, such dramatic policy shifts expose the human fallible nature of their leadership in ways that should alarm any thinking member. And behind this sanitized policy change lies a trail of human wreckage that the organization conveniently ignores. Consider the countless young people who sacrificed their educational dreams for organizational loyalty. There were bright students who turned down scholarships to prestigious universities, talented individuals who settled for menial jobs because they lacked credentials, families who remained trapped in poverty because education was deemed spiritually risky, and parents who now watch their children struggle financially while newer generations are told education is acceptable. And these victims followed what they genuinely believed was divine direction, only to discover it was merely the opinion of fallible men in Warwick, New York. Men who, it should be noted, often sometimes possessed the very high education they discouraged in others. Even in this apparent liberalization, the organization's control mechanisms remained firmly in place. The update is loaded with conditions, with warnings, and guilt-inducing rhetoric designed to make members second-guess their educational aspirations. They've simply moved from outright prohibition to sophisticated manipulation. Notice how the message repeatedly emphasizes the dangers of education, warns against associating with fellow students, and insists that education should never take priority over kingdom interests.
If you're considering additional education, think about the time it will require. Will you still have time for your spiritual routine and family obligations? Could your secular studies leave you so mentally exhausted that you have no energy left for meeting preparation or personal study? What about the length? How many months or years will it take to complete? Ecclesiastes 12:1 encourages young ones, "Remember then your grand Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of distress come, and the years arrive when you will say, I have no pleasure in them." If you're young, will the additional education allow you to give Jehovah your best, perhaps in the full-time service, while you're still young? Are there shorter education options in the same field? Think also about practical considerations like the location and the cost. You may be able to find an educational program close to home. But what if you find a program in another city? Or what if the education requires you to live on campus? Be aware that moving away from your family poses a serious spiritual danger, especially if you'll be living with relatives or others who don't share your beliefs. If you choose to get additional education, could you do so while continuing to live at home with your parents and even take a course online?
This isn't genuine acceptance, it is tolerance wrapped in fear-mongering. The organization wants to appear reasonable while maintaining psychological control over its members' life choices. The requirement to prayerfully analyze your motives is insidious. It places the burden of spiritual worthiness on the individual while preserving the organization's ability to judge those motives later. A member who struggles academically or faces challenges can be told they obviously had wrong motives, while those who succeed can be pressured to do more for the organization since they're clearly blessed. This educational reversal is a part of a larger pattern of doctrinal instability and should deeply concern any Jehovah's Witness paying attention. The organization has a long history of presenting teachings as absolute truth, only to quietly abandon them when they become inconvenient or untenable. Let's look at, for instance, the generation teaching that has been revised multiple times. Then there's the blood doctrine that has been gradually loosened through a complex system of fractions. And then views on military service, alternative service, and other conscience matters have shifted. And then, of course, there's the prophecies about 1975 and other dates that have been quietly abandoned. And each time the organization employs the same tactics, present the change as new light or clarification, avoid acknowledging the previous position, and expect members to accept the revision without question. This pattern reveals an organization more concerned with maintaining control than with discovering or teaching truth. One cannot ignore the likely economic factors driving this reversal. As the organization faces financial pressures and declining membership in developed countries, they need members with better earning capacity to support the work financially. An organization dependent on donations cannot indefinitely discourage the very education that enables higher earning potential. Several factors may explain this pivot. There's a retention crisis. Jehovah's Witnesses are hemorrhaging members, especially younger ones. The old anti-education stance alienates modern youth who see education as survival and not a luxury. Then there's the legal and PR concerns. By reframing education as a personal decision, the governing body shields itself from lawsuits and bad press. If members later suffer financially due to poor career prospects, the organization can claim it was your choice. Then, of course, the rise of online communities. Former witnesses have exposed the harm of Watchtower's anti-education stance across YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit. The leadership cannot continue to deny reality without appearing even more cultish. Additionally, the organization has increasingly needed educated professionals to handle legal challenges, technological demands, and complex business operations. It's remarkably convenient that higher education has become acceptable just as the organization needs more educated members to serve its institutional needs. And perhaps most damning is the complete absence of accountability in this announcement. There's no acknowledgement that the previous teaching may have caused harm, no expression of regret for those who suffered under the old policy, and certainly no compensation for those whose lives were diminished by following divine guidance that turned out to be merely human opinion. In any other context, such a dramatic policy reversal would demand explanation, an apology, and accountability. And the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to accept this change without question demonstrates the totalitarian nature of the organization's control over its members' thinking. And this reversal presents a crucial test of cognitive dissonance for thinking Jehovah's Witnesses. How does one reconcile believing that God's organization provided clear guidance against higher education with the current teaching that it's a matter of personal conscience? If the organization was wrong then, how can members be certain it's right now? And if it was right then, but circumstances have changed, what does that say about the timeless nature of so-called divine truth? The organization counts on members not asking these uncomfortable questions, instead accepting the change and moving forward without critical examination. And this willingness to accept contradictory teachings without question is perhaps the most troubling aspect of these updates. The Jehovah's Witness reversal on higher education serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of blind obedience to human religious authority. Those who sacrifice their educational opportunities in faithful compliance with organizational direction have learned the hard way that following men, regardless of their claimed divine backing, can lead to devastating personal consequences. This should prompt every Jehovah's Witness to seriously examine whether an organization that can so casually reverse decades of divine guidance truly deserves the unquestioning loyalty it demands. The human cost of this doctrinal flip-flop cannot be measured in statistics. It lives in the diminished opportunities, the financial struggles, and the broken dreams of countless individuals who trusted that they were following God's will. Until the organization demonstrates genuine accountability for this and other doctrinal reversals, thinking members should approach all future guidance with healthy skepticism. After all, today's divine truth may become tomorrow's clarified understanding. leaving another generation of faithful followers to bear the consequences of following fallible men who claim to speak for an infallible God.